We are honored to have Mr. Ivan Balabanov join us. Ivan has revolutionized the world of dog sports, dog training, genetics, breeding, and we are very, very honored to have him on today to talk about hopefully all of those topics, and hopefully we'll cover some of the benefits of play and possession games and chasing catch. Just invited Ivan in. Hope you guys are all great. Hey!
Hello, I made it. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. How are you?
Whew, that's not easy. That's my first Instagram live.
Yay.
Okay.
So, how are you doing tonight?
It's good. It's been busy, very busy, just like everybody else probably, but had to go to Hong Kong. That's why we had to postpone the other one, and just a lot of dog training and moving dogs that are stuck here because of the virus. And then we have the whole school that I run for dog trainers. So we're very close to getting them certified. So it's like busy.
Mm-hmm. Busy's always good. A lot of stuff going on.
Whew.
So Ivan, can you give us a rundown? You've been doing this a really long time, and you have a household name. You've revolutionized the industry, and I would love for you to talk about your background and how it all started.
Uh-oh. That can be a very long Instagram live. Gosh. Yeah, I mean, it's more than 40 years. It's probably, I don't know. I mean, when I first, and it depends where I really would count when I started anything dogs or when I decided that I want to be a professional dog trainer. So there is a lot of, but I would say somewhere in the maybe early 80s is when I was pretty sure that that's what I want to do. And at the time I was living in Bulgaria, which was a communist country, which means you cannot just get a ticket and fly somewhere to train dogs. Mm-hmm. And there was no YouTube, of course, there was no social media. So you had to really find really different ways how to do what you like to do. And it was, I basically took a really, really big risk and just escaped the country with the idea that maybe I'm gonna get caught, and if I get caught, maybe I'll get shot or work in some mine that nobody will ever see me. But you know, being young and crazy and determined that was my life. That's what I wanted to do. So I left everything behind and chased my dream. And it happened, you know. So from there, I went to Belgium, and that was so back in Bulgaria, I was doing it's kind of like a PSA type of sport. It's a Russian militarist sport. So I just had that talent and desire to do. So it within a year or two, there was just no competition. It became really boring for me. So I was like, I need to do something. I know I'm good at this. I know I like to do it. So then I went to Belgium, and that was, I'd say 88 or something like that, 88, 89. I got my first Malinois. I wanted a Malinois. I knew that I wanted a Malinois, but all I knew about them was at the time just a picture from a magazine and dog trainers talking about them. So when I first saw them, you know, I was so convinced that I'm gonna have one that it really didn't matter what I would see. And the first one that I saw, it was very funny because he had like this crazy overbite. I mean, he really looked like a parrot, you know. But it was a cool dog, and I was like, that's what I want. So from there, I started, you know, naturally from the that kind of military training, I moved into the Belgian ring programs. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to meet some of the legends, I mean, as far as dogs and trainers at that time. So it really, you know, like all my risk that I took and all the scare that I had to go through, it really, really paid off, like almost right away. It was like, yeah, no, that's what you want to do. And so, yeah, as far as Malinois, that was a very, very special time because it wasn't just Bulgaria. I mean, most of the world didn't know much about them. Besides the ring circles, the French ring and the Belgian ring and the Dutch sports KMPV and so on. But other than that, they were not that popular, if at all. So I pretty much grew up in the dog training world along with the Malinois, the popularity. So I got my first one in Belgium, and I made some connections, I made some friends. So it was the kennel name is the Diopotois. So I don't know, it's like people that are really, really into the breed, that would say a lot to them. People that are starting or not familiar with the breed, that probably will be name that they have heard that doesn't mean much to them. But that specific kennel was probably single-handedly like what made the breed boom in the 90s and the late 80s. So yeah, I got to meet the breeder. His name's Luc Vanstebruch. So he lives in a French part of the country. And I told him that I want to do sports and want to compete in a high level. And he got excited. It was, for me, like when I moved to Belgium, I didn't even speak English. So it was pretty hard in the beginning. But on top of that, he only speaks French. So we were like just sign language and having always somebody to help us translate. But there was a really funny story that when I decided to get my first puppy and I go to him and he knows that I'm going to get a puppy, and we sit, and it's kind of typical for, at least at the time in Belgium, you go and you talk dogs, but you sit down, have some beers, drink and talk. So it was a good time. And then there is this little nice dark male puppy that's maybe 9 weeks old, just walking around the room. And I can't get my eyes off of it. I mean, it's like the most gorgeous puppy I've seen. I'm like, I want this one. And the guy is like, no, that's just another puppy for work. And now I really thought that he's just trying to think that I'm not going to be good enough for that puppy or something, you know. But anyway, we wait. So he's like, okay, I'm going to bring you the dog that I have in mind. And he brings me this one female. And she's already like probably 4.5 months old. I mean, it's like not that it's still a puppy, but it's a older puppy than the typical 8-week-old one. And she has this big white chest and white feet, and it's just completely something that I didn't think, a female and an older and all this white on her. And I'm like, no, I don't want this dog. Like we were like, and so we had a really, really big like debates, conversations. Like, I mean, almost at the point that I see he's getting upset at me and I'm getting upset at him. And finally, like my friends trying to translate it, put a piece in that whole discussion, you know, because I'm so convinced that I want this one. And he's like, if you're going to do sport, that's the dog you should take. And so he was so cool that eventually what happened, he told me, okay, you take both. Take the puppy that you like, take the female, and in 2 weeks, you're going to bring one back, whichever one you do. So, of course, I mean, within 3 days, I knew which one. So I kept the female. And that was kind of how I started. She ended up being my foundation female for my kennel, the First Malinois. And we had the first puppies was 1989 or 90. So then from there, I was really, this was the time when Mondial started to, basically Mondial got introduced. And there was the French ring sport people, the Belgian ring sport people, some Germans, but not that many. Of course, the Dutch crowd, and they will meet and they will make demonstrations and they will get in all these fights of which program is better and which exercise from this one should go there. And that was a very interesting time in the history of the sports. Eventually, I decided that I'm going to move to the States for no apparent reason. Like, I didn't know nobody. I didn't know where I'm going to go. But somehow Belgium just started to be very small for me. Like, you know, in my head, like really no reason for it. And so I started to kind of do some research, and I hear that there is a possibility that you can get a job as a dog trainer, like actually, you know, getting paid to train dogs, which at the time in Europe was something people would laugh at. Even when I was leaving Bulgaria, my mom would be like, hopefully you get a job soon, because these dogs, that's not going to be, you know, you're not going to be good like that. And so anyway, moved to the States. It was pretty much San Diego, Los Angeles, or San Francisco for no reason, like literally for no reason. And eventually ended up in San Francisco because it just somehow sounded better to me at the moment. So I started to look for jobs, and I was not really thinking I'm going to get a job as a dog trainer. I was pretty good electrician at the time. And so I'm walking around trying to find some job. And I see trainers with guide dogs walking around on a street. So I start following them, and then I see them loading the dogs in a van, and I just ran to my car and I just really followed them to the guide dog school in San Rafael in California. And yeah, I'm like, okay, I want to get a job here, whatever job it is, but I'm going to work my way and I'm going to train dogs here. It was, you know, so they kind of laughed at me, but appreciated the enthusiasm, I guess. Mm-hmm. They're like, well, we don't have jobs right now, and there is a process, and, you know, we have applications, and just kind of being very nice, saying that it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. But they were curious. I mean, like the accent that I have now, it was pretty much the same. So it was interesting for them that it's okay, it's a foreigner and it's a dog person. So I was like, well, what kind of dog training you do, and what is the methods? Do you know this book or this, just all this old school American dog training books that I've never heard of course, because I didn't grow up here. Like, no, I don't know, but I'm sure I can do better. I just always had a very big confidence and big mouth. So to make it a little short, I went back home. I mean, it was kind of like, I didn't give up, but they said, yeah, we will call you at some point, but pretty much trying to tell me that it's just not going to work out. But next thing you know, like 3 days later, the training director of the school calls me. He's like, well, do you want to come? We want to test you. I'm like, of course I want to come. Are you kidding me? Like, what time? And so I went, and then they did. And yeah, I ended up getting the job, and went through their whole program, being an apprentice and instructor and so on. And that was really good for me. in one hand because I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any, like credit card history or anything like this, and that was a very, very well-paid job and very secure job. So it was just beautiful how things were working out always. It's one of those things that, as Bob Marley says, where there is a will, there is a way. And so, but it was a very demanding job. I learned so much there. I also taught them so much. And there were so many stories from the school at the time. Like it was very typical, traditional training. I mean, you cannot, the best you can do is maybe praise the dog a little bit, but forget about playing or giving them a treat or something. It was a very, like a, really traditional style, old school. But that was really, 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 really good experience. Like when I teach in my school right now, I have so many stories and so many examples of how to train dogs, and yeah, like it always comes to mind. Eventually though, I had to, I got on my feet, and unfortunately I couldn't compete at the time because of the schedule of the school. The school always had a very rigid, just like any school, this is when the students will come, this is when they're gonna go home. Now you have vacation, and if it happens that there is some competition, great. I was always out of luck. Like all the big competitions for 5 years I could not go to. It was really frustrating on that end of things. So then I was, okay, I will move on to something else. So then I went back to San Francisco, and I got a job at the SPCA, the San Francisco SPCA. And that was also very interesting job because it was the first no-kill shelter in the world at the time. And that's early 90s. And in early 90s, there was a lot of pit bull fighting underground, like a lot in the area. So they will do all sorts of riots and bring just 20, 50, 60 dogs. And yeah, it was a very interesting experience to work there. But it also allowed me to have free time and do the things that I wanted to do with my own dogs. So then I started to do more and more club training and competitions, and people started to see that there is something different that I do. And of course the interest kept growing to the point that I literally was forced to stop my job because I just had so many clients and so many places that I can make money that was impossible. And coming from, from Eastern Europe, I wouldn't even say middle class family. We were pretty poor where I come from. So in my head, it was always, I have to work, I have to make money. You cannot say no to any client. But then the moment in time came to where it was, I'm like, no, I cannot not say no, because I'm just gonna train myself. Like I will start to hate what I do. So then I stopped to work for anybody, and then I started my own thing. That was like I think 98 or 1999. Yeah, and that was also, I mean, talking back with my parents and my friends in Europe, and it's like, oh no, I'm training dogs. And they're like, man, you gotta start to think about your future. You're gonna get old and you're not gonna whatever. And I'm like, just leave me alone. Mm-hmm. And so from there, a lot of competitions, a lot of different, I still kept doing ring sport. I still do. I like it. We trained the very first dog that went to the During World Championship was one of my breeding and trained from a puppy all the way by me. So that was a pretty cool accomplishment. I did with the female that I had, I did some competitions, but it was not easy because again, with the time that I have, it was difficult to find time to train. So, and what was interesting, I was always making my own training. I always had my own ideas. I always would look somebody training and I'm like, okay, I can do this better and I can do better and I can do this better. And somehow it was happening. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just, talking until eventually I started to see that, well, I would go to competitions, and like in the late 90s, I remember, like in San Jose, San Francisco, the whole Bay Area there, like all the clubs, they would not really want me to go to compete because they have their club trial. They want their members do well, and it just doesn't make sense for me to go and just take over, So, but we are good friends and I help them all the time. But what we agreed on is that I always will enter the last dog in the trial, so the judges don't have any criteria right from the beginning. So, and then eventually, yeah, I won my first national championship. And what is cool about my accomplishments, they're truly my accomplishments. Like I bred my dogs, I train my dogs the way I train, not taking anything from anywhere. And yeah, so I won one competition, then I won another one, and then, I don't know, I probably have won 15 or 16 national championships. I won 2 world championships, all with dogs that I breed, all with dogs that I train. So then, yeah, from California, then I was like, I wanted to really have more space. We ended up training a lot of, like, it was a very beautiful area right by the Golden Gate Bridge for anybody that lives around there, Park Presidio. And I was working with all the police there. So they would give me green light and we would train in this really just the most beautiful place in the world, that the temperature is always 70 degrees, no matter what month it is. And then you have the ocean and you have the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's just like the paradise of places. But it wasn't mine, so I couldn't really, I wanted to have something on my own, and that's kind of how I ended up in Florida. So from there, yeah, very, very much into breeding, genetics, training, science, all of it.
Awesome. Well, you have a lot to be proud of. I want to bring this, wrap this into the genetics, because it sounds like you're genetically programmed to be very confident and go for it. When with the first Malinois breeder, you're telling the breeder, hey, I want this dog. He's telling you, take
Right.
that dog, and you're like, no, I want this. Or going to the different countries, not knowing the language, you have to be very confident to put yourself in that position. How does it work with the dogs that you select for the sports, and just how you go about breeding in general?
Yeah, so yeah, my story with genetics, it's an interesting one. Like when I really got into it, again, coming with a background from military type of training in the 80s, that's a pretty hardcore, just yank and crank training. And then kind of the whole positive training came in. "Don't shoot the dog" came out, Karen Pryor just blew everybody's minds away that positive reinforcement can do everything. So of course everybody jumped on the bandwagon. I mean, who wouldn't? Like, if you really think that there is a better way, why would you not, regardless of what it is, right? So I spent good 3-4 years in it. In fact, I wrote a book in the 90s, late 90s. It's called Advanced Shoots Hunt, and a lot of my views were still very much, the core was to use negative punishment and a lot of positive reinforcement, and, you know, avoid the aversive type of training. But of course, when you actually just you don't want to just sound like, oh, this works better than something else, but you actually have to be able to prove that it does. And that proof always fell short. And I'm extremely good trainer. Like, I don't have problems talking like this because I really am. But if I can use positive reinforcement and shaping and all this, the whole ideology as it was booming at the time, and I was not able to make the results that I want, and I was seeing my dogs getting frustrated, if anything, even though, you know, we were avoiding compulsion and things like that. But there was just a limitation. And then there was another thing that started to be very problematic for me. And again, this I teach a lot on my modules at the school now for the young people that learn. Like the whole Skinnerian behaviorism, and how that ideology came up to today was, you know, there was a guy named Watson, and, you know, some people know, some people don't, but there was like a way back in time, he had a very famous quote that he, you know, at the time they believed that you can do anything, you can accomplish absolutely anything through reinforcement and punishment. It's just a matter of starting with a so-called clean slate, which they also believed. So he had a very famous saying that it's still used today, that if you give me 10 young children, I will make them whatever I want. I'll make them a doctor, a thief, you know, just through that. And of course, now we know that that's not, it just cannot happen that way. And the reason it cannot happen is because of genetics, because all of us actually come programmed with certain things. You know, like when we talk about primary reinforcers, it's we always think of certain things, but one of the really cool things to look at when you think of primary reinforcers is that it's something that it's innate, something that you don't need to learn. You're coming in it, you're coming on Earth programmed, ready to do it. You know, yeah, there's so many examples of this, but, you know, just like how a shark doesn't need to learn that it's a shark. They know they're shark. You know, when it's time for you to reproduce, you know that it's time to reproduce. You don't need to learn. You get better, but you come programmed with certain things. And as dog trainers, that's somehow it's still a very cloudy area, and especially young trainers, and meaning not young trainers, but trainers that are starting in the industry. Of course, some very famous trainers as well, unfortunately, but a lot of them think that you can just like Watson said, that you can change behavior or guide it through reinforcement and punishment. And it's just not possible. It's just not possible. Certain behaviors that are in your genetic makeup, you cannot change. You know, like in the early 80s, whatever, the whole gay community, being in San Francisco, I heard all about it, and the interest in genetics and the whole reinforcement behaviorism, you know, they were trying to do all sorts of things. Like they will show them a man and they will give them a shock and then reward them when they see a magazine with a woman, and it don't work. Of course it cannot work. This is against what your genes are telling you, who you are and what you need to do. So it becomes a very, very big problem with dog training, because often dog trainers want to show off how good they are. So if something is not working, they just start to press more and demand more, and never really recognize and never really even looking for what is possible and what is not possible. Of course, you can change, you can suppress things, but the moment you allow it some freedom, it will go to a home base. And whatever the home base is, you better know what it is. And the best thing that you can do as a dog trainer is to learn how to guide it instead of try to flip it around and change it to something else. So when you know, I just realized more and more the power of genetics. There was, you know, like in the 60s already, the whole Skinnerian behaviorism started to break down, like big time. There were so many cool studies that came up, and to show basically that that's not true, that there is, you know, you cannot change everything through reinforcement and punishment. And also the instincts of the dogs. I mean, it used to be that they didn't even believe that there is instincts. Then, of course, there is the ethology and the behaviorism, but eventually what really became very powerful was the evolutionary psychology, which kind of really starts to explain why we do those things. Like, for example, you know, if you start walking on the grass and all of a sudden you jump away, and you probably just saw a stick or a hose. But that evolution of your success of survival has programmed it very deeply in you that this will be a snake and you will have to jump out. And when you, yeah, genetics are so interesting. I can really talk for days and days about it. There is something, you know, even people think courage or bravery. Everything is really genetic. Like you actually have a genetic predisposition to be this kind of person or a dog that when situation comes, it's not that you're not afraid, it's not that you're whatever, but you're ready to put it all in. And okay, if today I'm gonna die, that's fine, but I'm in. And that's another genetic thing. And so is the other one. Oh, I'm gonna just stay away. I am, as a puppy, a little bit shy, a little bit unsure. And those puppies suffer a lot, and those dogs also suffer a lot, and mostly from dog trainers that don't understand genetics, because they are convinced that there is some magic that they will do, and that dog all of a sudden is going to be the confident dog like the other one. And it just ends up sad for the dog that this is not recognized, and providing the environment that that dog's gonna strive and flourish with. And instead, we are trying to fix something that's not fixable and just tormenting the dogs like that. And that happens all the time. It's such a bad idea. So genetics really, like, there is a very cool book. And again, like, I mean, I don't know, I think at least I have 3 modules in my school that I talk about this, but there is a book that I highly recommend anybody that's interested in genetics. I mean, there's few books, but let's just say one. It's Robert Plumbing, and the book name is Blueprint. And there is always the debate about nurture versus nature, right? Environment versus genetics. Which one is more important, and which one can influence the other? And of course, they interact with each other. So the way genetics work is, let's say you're not really a gardener, but you take a shovel and you start doing some things, and pretty soon you get calluses. And those calluses, they're genetically ready to come out at the right time. But if you avoid certain things, then they don't need to come out, right? But that doesn't mean that you're really changing genetics. There is just no need for them right now, but they're there at any moment. So Plumbing did a really, really cool studies, almost kind of what I think stumbled upon some accident of in the World War in England. There was a lot of adoptions. Mothers were just dropping their babies at orphanages because it's a war. And twins, identical twins. And the difference between identical twins and the normal twins is that they are actually, like when you think of cloned animal or a person, the identical twins are basically clone. That's why they're called identical. It's the egg splits in 2. And so that means that they are really super interesting material for observation and study for this kind of study. The one kid gets adopted by some middle-class family. The other one goes to a super rich, well-off family. Nobody knows where the other one, no connection, nothing. And it just so happens that one day they meet at the university. They just walk at each other in a hallway. And they know. It's just like, you don't need to say nothing. It's like, and then they start talking to each other. And of course, it ends up that they like the same similar music, the same food, the same interest in science. Even their wives have the same features. Like it's just amazing what starts to come out. And besides that sensation of, oh, this is so cool, then they start to really evaluate. And it's like, okay, well, how come he grew up in a completely different environment than him? But ultimately, they're right here. And depending on the day, when you measure, one is a little bit more excitable or more irritated. But then on another day, but they're basically identical. And so next thing you know, they are showing them on TV, and there is a third one. And that's very uncommon to have 3 identical twins, super uncommon. But he sees them on TV and he knows, like, there's nothing to, there's absolutely nothing to say. He just packs and goes and drives to the university. And there is a movie, actually. There is a movie. I can't remember what was the movie called, but anybody that's interested in genetics and stuff, that's twin studies are super cool. And they prove, they just flip everything around. And no matter how you like it or you don't like it, you have to accept it, because What plumbing says is very cool, especially with how dog trainers believe that, okay, I'm going to get the little puppy and I'm going to make him whatever I want. It does not work that way. No matter what you try, there is a genetic makeup that has limitations and has direction. Just like a kid that the mom says, no, you're going to play piano and that's, you're going to be really good at it, or you're going to play tennis, or whatever the idea is, you know. The interesting thing about genetics is, even in those cases, when the mom wants to teach the kid to play something or be good at something and eventually get to school and then eventually get the money and so on, it's that, you know, if it's a boy, it's going to end up attracting females and it's going to be able to reproduce, and reproduction, and, you know, it's a very important thing for the genes. So even though you don't know, but that's ultimately evolutionary psychology that's telling you this. Not to go too far off on this, what plumbing says is very cool, that he says parents are in parents, how was it? Parents are important, but they don't matter. It's a very tricky thing, and it's very, very hard to accept. And what it means is, it's not that you can live without your parents. Of course, having parents and having nice family that's taking care of you and doing things, it's great. But they don't matter in terms of your genetic predisposition. Like kids that's gonna, you know, somebody's gonna start to go through the school system and parents gonna help them with the homework and get all A's and move on to the high school and eventually work its way college, still okay, and then eventually they're paying a ton of money and the kid is in the university, and now they either have to somehow continue to help, or there will be a very hard check. It's like, no, you really cannot be just because you want. And it's the same with dogs, it's the same with puppies. There's so many cool studies, and especially after this one that I was telling you, plumbing, they're, I think it's in millions, like since the 96 or something, they've done this up till right now, just extensive studies on twins. And you know, like, I don't know if you have siblings, but anybody that does, or anybody that has kids, knows very well that they can grow up, they do grow up in the same environment, they are taken care in the same way, and they still have their own paths and their own interests, unless there is that genetic makeup that, you know, the identical twins kind of thing. So the genetics are, you know, super neglected, and it goes all the way back to the behaviorism that we are taught that, you know, you can be anything you want to be. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't try. You know, like if you want to be a world champion, you have to say that you're going to be a world champion, I guess. Because if you just are going and I'm just training to test myself and to see where I am, nobody ever succeeds that way. You know, you're just putting yourself right there, and that's where you are. But it's also not good to fool yourself. There is a lot of, you know, like from experience. I mean, I train, I travel all the time, and I teach so many people that are very successful and so many people that are not. And my job is to look at the dog and look at the person and tell them if they have that predisposition to be what they want to be. Because I've been there and I know what it takes. And I know what it takes from the dog, and I know what it takes for the personality. You know, like you have to know how to deal with stress. You have to you have to be super like, yeah, it's such a combination, it's such a package, but a lot of times people don't want to hear it. And what happens also is when somebody says that you cannot, then next one tells you, oh, I can make it. And of course, this is a big problem in the whole society, not just dog training, of, you know, that there is money to be made, and there is always both ways, you know, somebody that wants to and somebody that tells them that they can. And, you know, it goes on that way. I know people that they have spent 20 years, they have went through maybe 15 dogs, and they're still where they are, but they still have that idea that they're gonna, something great is coming ahead of them. But they're getting frustrated, and then the dogs are suffering because of that. And I think it's really important to recognize where you are and who you really can be. And I don't think it's hard, but you gotta kind of push out the noise around you, because it's always very misleading. Deep inside, you know who you are. Like, you really know. Like, if I know I'm not interested in ice skating. I mean, I like ice skating, but I wouldn't do figure skating. It's just no interest for me. But I know kids that would love to do it. I would like to fight, or, you know. So another thing with genetics, real quick, you can, let's say there is some fighting sport, let's say boxing or UFC or whatever, and there is a champion, and he's been champion for quite some time. But he starts to realize that there are better competitors than him. And the moment that comes in your head, you know that you're not going to be able to win, because you're starting to fight or compete against somebody that has nothing to lose and has a very strong will and believe in himself, that they are, like, let's say they're in the rankings 10th or something like that. They're like, no, I'm really good. I can definitely get up there. To where the one that it's already on the top, and it's starts to feel that there is better than him, then they start to avoid the competitions, then there is all the excuses, and ultimately that's kind of how it gets changed. But when you have where I'm going with that story is that something very interesting can happen to a kid or a dog, like when we talk genetics. So in a kid example, it's like we can pump the kid up, and we can tell him, hey, you can be the best tennis player in the world right now. We just need to keep going strong every other day, and we hire this trainer for that and that and that. And what really happens, again, it's an innate. As a person or as a dog, you know what you can and what you cannot do. But when they push you in that place that you have to perform and meet that expectations that's been built up, and you know you cannot meet it, what happens is actually quite the opposite. You shut down. You start to go back, and you start to look at excuses why you're not going to do it today or next month or next year. So instead of, parents and trainers think that they're really, really going to build up something, it actually goes the other way around. To give you an example with dogs, and let's take protection training, for example, any protection sports. So if the puppy or the dog is afraid or has some reservation, some awareness of a stick hit, it's like, well, that's I don't know if I can handle that. So as a trainer, you have an option to say, I'm going to go through this whole program and I'm going to convince you that it's not going to hurt. and I'm going to touch you, and we're going to play, and we're going to spend so much time, and we're going to counter condition, and all these names and procedures we're going to use on you. And sure, eventually you're going to convince the puppy or the dog that that's not going to hurt, until the day comes that actually he gets stabbed and it hurts. And now he's not prepared, and everything just crumbles in an instant. All this hard work and all this magic, it just goes out just like that, because the approach is wrong. So the only approach to be successful is to see how far those genetics can pull through, instead of trying to fool the dog or the kid that this is not going to hurt or this whatever. No, it can hurt, but maybe you can overcome it. Maybe that's how you will go through. And so training, as I said, there is like almost two really distinctive different paths of approaches to training. And most trainers are very busy to teach behaviors, completely disregard emotions. And emotions are super critical, because without emotion, how you feel about doing something. Do you like to do it, or do you not like to do it? Do you feel confident that you're good at it, or you feel that you're forced to do? Emotions is probably the more important thing than the actual behavior. But as a typical trainer, everybody is preoccupied, being with the clicker, being with the electric working level collar, but it's all about behaviors. It's a sit, come back, go to a place, whatever. How the dog feels, what is the motivation? It's almost so secondary that, and eventually it just surfaces. There is no way that it wouldn't. And then it becomes apparent how important it is. And some trainers make a note of it and change, and some just do more of what they normally do. But that's genetics. I can really talk so much about it.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, before you went into the specific stories, like the twins or the triplets, I would think, you going to different countries and working with people that you don't speak the same language, that would kind of give you a way to communicate with someone or an animal, like on an emotional level. Like, you don't have to actually hear them talking. You can kind of see them, like a movement, body language.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That actually, I will add, fill in a little more to this, because again, something like I'm super big on play. Like I place the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, as an interaction with dogs. There is trainers that, especially like agility trainers, still will fill up a toy with treats to teach the dog to play, which is completely mind-blowing. I mean, it's ridiculous. There is the marine SeaWorld type of trainers. There's a whole wave of trainers that believe that play is something that you teach, something that becomes, reinforced with a primary reinforcement, and therefore the dog starts to like it. And play is a super important biological need. Like we come ready, and primary reinforcers, food, sex, sleep, all this, avoid discomfort. Plays the same thing. It's an innate biological programming that we come with, and especially mammals. And all mammals come with that. Very few humans, dogs for sure, it never gets old. It's not like you can see a cow playing ball. You can see, like, if you go on YouTube, you can see a dolphin in the open, completely random dolphin, and some rugby players from Australia tossing a rugby ball, and the dolphin is doing fetch without obviously a wild animal, So all mammals specifically are really, really ready to play as youngsters, but as they grow up, it kind of goes away. But play, if you deprive a kid from play, it will not develop correctly. If you, dogs, people, we can play, and we can come up with endless, like there is an infinite number of games that you can come up with. You will never be able to say, okay, I cannot come up with another game. There is always going to be like a game that you can come up with, and that's to tell you how prepared you are to play. What play does, it teaches cooperation, trust. I mean, when we're talking about building relationship and engagement and all these things that trainers, you know, cliche words with how we do with the food, when you play, you actually build on this, and you don't need language. You can, like, if a kid is good at playing soccer and he has a confidence that it's good, it's not made up from his parents telling him, he actually knows he's good. You can take any American kid and throw him in the favelas in Brazil, and he would know nobody, and it would be the scariest neighborhood ever. And within 5 minutes, he will be playing with the kids soccer. That's how powerful games are. And kind of, that's why I interrupted you, because my passion and love for dogs was recognized by other people elsewhere in the world immediately. And the connections and interactions were they just kept rolling because of that. So it's a very similar thing.
Mm-hmm. I actually got I think it was for the first video I watched of yours was the focused healing video. And that completely changed the way that I interact with Rika, with my Belgian Malinois, who's a year old. Really making everything a game, and it's made just the whole training experience so much better, like more fun, more exciting, and it's not so like I feel like I'm using my imagination more.
Yeah, for you for sure are. And that's exactly, there is like a door opens up to where the interaction goes both ways, and it's perfectly understood by both of you, and the intentions and the emotions, to where there is no way you can accomplish something like this in any other way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I want to also ask you, where do you see the future of dog training going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a big one. That's bigger than genetics. Yeah, I try to stay optimistic. I try to think that eventually we can train dogs in a better way. We can treat them with respect, and somehow unite in all different areas of like all dog lovers, like, you know, and protect each other from the animal rights. And there's just people that really don't want us to have dogs, and they're winning because we're splitting and we're fighting these little fights, like 5 people from this and 5 people from there. It's like, oh no, you're not a good trainer because you're following this ideology and you're something. And of course there is truths to that, but there is a much bigger picture, and we need to try to stay on track and support each other. And at the same time, though, I'm very much against that there is always that approach of, I'm going to tell you that you're a great trainer, and I expect that you tell me that I'm a great trainer. And then you're going to tell him that I'm not that great because I'm doing this and this, but then we're going to meet again. And so there is a lot of shady interactions between us. And when I wish that when somebody sees bad training, they call it, and it doesn't matter who it is. If that doesn't happen, I don't see how we move forward. And the reason, like, competitions are very cool. When we have competitions, they're kind of like, you know, like scientists, they go to the lab and they do their experiments and they do their findings. In dog training, you have competitions, and the competition field is basically the lab. And this is where, you know, you talk the talk and then you walk the walk. It's not on the keyboard, and it's not how many followers you have, and it's not but it's a very interesting time with the social media, because it's very easy to become famous without a base. And then yeah, you start to teach and you don't know. And there is it's kind of strange situation, because there is that astrophysic, really smart guy, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He has a super cool quote. Let me see if I can remember it right now. A great challenge in life is that you, oh man, I'm gonna butcher it, but it's basically, you think that you know, so you know a topic well enough, but you just don't know that you don't know. And if you stay in a bubble, you're always gonna think high of yourself, and you will not dare to check yourself. But unless you check yourself, you have no progress, you have no evolution as a trainer. Then even if you have so many followers and make people believe, and you believe in yourself, but you don't go and you check yourself and see where is my lane. Let's say there is 80 dogs that are going to compete, and I'm going to go and I'm going to get ready, and I will see if my dog and all the shit that I make up in my head actually where it stands with everything. A lot of people, that's why they train and compete, and a lot of people, that's the reason why they avoid it. And we don't have, like, you know, in that industry, like, having certification is a very easy thing, right? I mean, it's laughable. You don't need certification. You can start your dog business tomorrow. Like, there's just such simple steps. You make just 2-page website, you put a Google ad, you make the social media, and you get your first client tomorrow, guaranteed. But if you truly want to be somebody, and you want to be good at what you do and get the satisfaction, because there's a whole different level of satisfaction when you actually are good at something and you're teaching something that has value, that you're really giving something back that makes people grow. It's not bullshitting people. It's really worth it. But there is, you know, like, unless this happens, we're stuck in this situation where we are right now. And ultimately, yeah, some people call it electric sting, some people call it shock collar. Then you have, it's ridiculous how we talk about each other and what we do and what we believe, but we never can check. Everybody would avoid that unless they feel that they're good, or they don't mind where they are. They are fine with who they are and where they are. Other than that, there is going to be, you know, I don't know if that answers the question really. It's a tough one. This is always a very difficult one to talk about. Like, again, I have really nothing to prove, nothing in no area of anything that I've done, anything that I have thought of that I want to accomplish, I have accomplished. And I have accomplished it a few times more. So like if I say, well, I don't need to compete right now, why would I? I mean, I've won since like 2000 till today. I have won 15 championships. So that means that there is 5, maybe I didn't have a dog, I was on transition, whatever it was. And then I have won a world championship, and then I did it again. And I can completely stop and just say I'm the greatest. But what's the point? Like if you stop yourself like that, then you don't progress. Then if you're not going up, you're going down, right? You're just gonna end up watching TV and eating Doritos and eventually just kind of die a boring life. But the reason I go and compete is because I always think of different ways how I can stimulate a dog, how I can interact with a dog, how would that, what I'm trying to teach and work with, how is it going to perform? Is it going to stand the pressure of all the other competitors? And being innovative, and like this is what it's about, you know? So.
Absolutely. Ivan, thank you so much for sharing everything that you've shared, and also inspiring me and everyone that's watching, and just the dog world in general.
You're welcome. It was fun. Hopefully everybody that listens, go after your dreams. Don't sit back, challenge yourself. It's okay to lose. It's okay to fall down. If you don't fall down, you're not gonna get up and go forward. You're just gonna stay as most of the people do. So dream high. I'm a good example. Make it happen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan.
Yeah.
See you.